Mid. All right, we can keep going, but don't do the whole like "How are you doing, James?" thing. Let's just get into it.
Okay, fine. That's good.
Episode 4 is called "Slow Machines," and this is where I just got to start doing my spiritual practice, which is taking my favorite minimal techno tracks and slowing them down. That's it. It's as simple as that. But man, it chills me out like nothing else. And it's actually harder than I would expect, because you have to find the right song, because a slow snare sounds really shitty. But when I slow
Maybe throw
down,
some reverb on it too.
Oh, you have to soak it in reverb for sure, especially if you're not very good at matching beats.
Yeah, this is a continual issue with you.
But I think the idea of taking machine music and then slowing it down to such a chugging cadence almost feels like I can kind of like peek between the drums, and I start hearing there's just more information there, more sonic information. And I think it then does become kind of biological, or kind of like a heartbeat or something in that neighborhood that I really enjoy. And man, when I slowed down Plastic Man's Consumed, it just became almost religious for me.
Yeah, and this kind of like brings up, well, as you started in here, but Plastic Man is Richie Hawtin. So like the first track, Richie Hawtin, you want to just say something about that? Or
that was from those the Concept Record series, which there is another episode way further down the road that I dedicated solely to his concept records, because it was one of those rare moments now in music where I still remember in I guess it was probably 96 that they came out, I'm pretty sure. I'm in college, and that DJ Carlos Sufrant is like, you have to get these concept records. They were expensive at the time, and I'm
it's
a college
really weird
kid.
to me that he actually is the reason why my friend Scott and I, we were at some kind of club in Detroit, and must have been like 97, 98, and he was like playing Basic Channel and was like, this is the record, come to the shop, like, get it, whatever. So it was like, we
That's
were
the power
both
of taste, man. I mean,
we
I
were
think
both
it's just
enhanced by that man.
Like how just somebody can radiate out and affect other people, which is really cool.
Yeah.
So anyway, I buy these records. At the time, Plastic Man, or Richie Hawtin recording under Plastic Man, was just known for that 303 sound, and it's very acidy, kind of melodic quality. And these things were just fucking skeletal clicks, and I hated it. But because I just dropped all this money on them, and they were only one of like 15 records I had, I kept listening to them, and then suddenly, finally, something clicked for me, and then I'm like, this is brilliant. And now, Christ, exactly 30 years later, it's still, I don't ever listen to those early Plastic Man records, but the Concept series is definitely like a landmark.
Yeah, for sure. And I would just say I have a connection with this too. As we discussed before, we're from a different generation of techno, but completely different. But so like, I don't know when my first Packard plant. I was when I was an undergraduate, so it must have been sometime between 91 and 95. I'm guessing like 93, 94, something like that. And it was just you talk about slowing down a track to get more sonic information. I would just say the type of records that we used to listen to at that time had a lot of information on it that you wouldn't hear on any other sound system than a Richie Hawtin sound system. So that you had like a totally different experience, almost unrecognizable. You would just I can remember, it's a very sparse song, it's a wonderful song, a track, Spastic, and he played, the first time I saw him, he played that maybe 3 times throughout his set. And it was so intense, like probably the most, and there was things in that track, I don't know what he made it with, like I'm imagining just pretty elemental drum machines and stuff like that, because it really isn't too much melody or anything on that thing. It's just rhythm. And the textures that are lost by, just our cheap bullshit sound systems is unbelievable.
The materials are even different today, aren't they?
Oh, yes. Yeah, thank you for setting me up for that one. In Chicago, when we would go to parties, it was a different generation, but we had, these giant oak bass bins, and there was like people that like actually, from what I understood, had been to school like at like Purdue engineering school, like to learn how to make these things, and they would just cart around in trucks, and you would go to the parties where you knew that was because on the flyer was whose sound system was or whatever, and so you would go by the DJ for sure, but like you would also go by just the sound system, and I don't think anybody will ever have an experience like that again. Just 6-foot bass bin oak. There's nothing like that. Like, so no matter how much you shrink down speakers and use as hard plastic as you can find, it doesn't resonate correctly. So like people now, and the way technology works, is like a smaller speaker can give me a much louder sound than I used to ever have. But like this loudness was volume. It wasn't the irritating sort of loudness. There were many parties I went to at the Packard plant. My ears really didn't even ring afterwards, and it was the loudest thing I've ever been at. It was because it like just filled the space of this factory warehouse. And again, talk about liminal spaces and technologies to get you there. Set and setting of a Houghton set was pretty cool. And actually, Derek May was there that night. D. Wynn was there that night. And it was just an incredible thing. And of course, Jeff Mills was not there that night, but I have seen Jeff Mills in Detroit before. So driving up long drives, it was a part of the thing too. Dead of winter. I was in undergraduate in Southern Indiana. And so it's about an 8-hour drive up to Detroit. Man, when you start rolling in to Detroit in the 90s, and it was very desolate, there was no kind of effort at refurbishing or whatever it is, Renaissance, no Detroit Renaissance at all at that point. And so it was pretty wild. And then you had to play the whole game, where you go to the map point or whatever it was. You get the map, and then you got to go another point, and then they would give you the next coordinates. And it was like, it got kind of old after. I was like, oh, the Packard plant. But the first time, it was pretty cool. And then rolling into the Packard plant, which is a city block at least, of at a building that had been totally abandoned for at least in the 90s, I guess 20 years, whenever Packard stopped making those cars. And there were still bits of the assembly line in there, gigantic gears and those kind of things in the bathrooms. And there were so weird because the iridescent lights were like, I don't know, they were like from the original time or something, like they were just like kind of flickering in and out, and like, and then somebody had put the water on, so it was amazing that they could even get water in there. Just the toilets were all just overflowing. The sinks were just constantly flowing, and it was a very, very. You kids think you've seen liminal spaces because you've seen the movie Backrooms. I'm telling you, if you weren't from my generation of techno, you don't know what a liminal space is. So that's my old man rant. You kids have never heard noise and sound like I have, nor have you ever been to, I don't know, the mothership. So anyways.
When you were talking about driving up to the Packard plant in winter.
Eerie.
Yeah. And then in the last episode, I was talking about, these night drives in the dead of winter, listening to whatever, techno or electro or basic channel kind of stuff. Machine music, whether it's slow or fast, it's interesting to me where I feel like it is such cold weather music, or from places known for cold weather.
Yeah.
I remember one time I drove across the country and I hit Santa Monica Beach and I was playing Autechre, and it just felt so fucking
out of
wrong.
place,
like in an interesting way, but it was just, it struck me. I was like, this music doesn't make any sense here.
Yeah. Like a San Francisco, not San Francisco, but like the whole LA, San Francisco kind of rave thing in the 90s was all basically, really tropical feeling house music to me. So yeah, it's really, really different. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And it's very sparse, and most people hear it. And when they hear it, I remember, listening to it and like not getting it also initially, but then like kind of understanding later. And I had a little bit of setup to it because I had heard Electric Body music on the Wax Tracks label. And, those dudes love their sparse beats and their, sparser synth lines and whatever, and all kind of weirdo samples. And there's so much of that that's connected to, what became techno. But so I had a little bit of setup, so like the transition was a little bit easier for me. But most people hear that and they're just like, that's not music. Fine. Well, whatever it is, it's great. So
yeah, well, I mean, for me, like we said in the first episode, Electrifying Mojo primed the pump for me.
Yeah.
Just hearing Kraftwerk and,
Right.
Devo B-52s mixed up with Africa Bambaataa and, Parliament and so on. So then, because I grew up listening to hip hop, and then suddenly realizing I don't understand these lyrics at all, or they don't relate to me. I like the instrumentals. And then tracking down all the instrumentals, and then finally listening to Mojo, I'm like, oh, this is where it came from. I still think there's just something very interesting about a generation raised on samples and then going back and revisiting the source, versus the other way around.
Yeah,
which is what our whole culture is.
Yeah, for sure. And I don't know. I just feel like that minimal tech sound, people, and because it's machine music, feel like it's soulless or whatever. But the other name for it in Detroit was always high tech soul, right. And it was very soulful in a way that would be not obvious to a lot of people hearing it. I remember reading a Robert Hood interview where he was saying, like, he is the master of minimal techno. That's what he's known for. Bleeps and boops and like just all kind of like things that would drive most people insane that I absolutely love. And anyway, he said, having grown up in the black church and Pentecostalists, kind of catching the Holy Ghost moments in the sanctuary, which this is where the term 4 to the floor comes from. It's like the organist is like slamming all 4 bass pedals down, on 4/4 onto the floor, and he associated his music, his minimal techno, with catching the Holy Ghost and this very soulful, lovey, experience of, that he grew up on, and he associated with spirituality and family and soul. So yeah,
there's that aspect of the music from the time, but there's also more of a future orientation to it as well.
Correct. Yeah, like
Autechers. This is still from an era where you could kind of still pronounce some other song titles. Yolkwin. But that album in particular, it just has that, we talked about artificial intelligence and early warp, but it had that sense of, a new millennium is coming, technology is amazing. So this did feel like the music of the future because you were using technology entirely to do that. Now a compilation called Artificial Intelligence or even machine music, it just no longer feels like it's oriented towards the future. It's now oriented towards collecting information from the past. But that inherent optimism, I just wonder if that can ever be reclaimed, or that does become kind of like a lost future feeling.
Yeah, that's cool, because we've talked about it before. We're going to just have to do a whole episode on it. The artificial intelligence warp series, I had it in at least 2 discs, and there were 2 double discs of each, but one was red and one was green, and they had cool artwork on them that was at the time it looked cool. It's looks stupid now, but I
think it was like a robot sitting in a living room, it was all something like that.
It was all generated on a computer or whatever, and so there was a kind of cheesiness to it in a way, but yeah, the music had a very hopeful vibe in a lot of ways, into the future. But I feel like even there, there was this kind of, because Aphex Twin was on that thing, I'm pretty sure. Yeah. Black Dog was on that thing. Autechre was on that thing.
B12.
Yeah, B12. All was on that comp, and so there was a kind of sinisterness that was a part. It wasn't complete, bright, shining futures or whatever. There was the hint that this might not work out like we think it's going to, or something like that. So, yeah, for me at any rate. And Basic Channel, though, all warm, fuzzy technology to me, man. You got to tell the story of your first experience. Or if you didn't already, maybe you just did. I forgot.
I can't keep track anymore, but the shorthand version is just sneaking out when I first got my license to St. Andrews Hall. I thought I was going to go check out some hip-hop show or whatever, and then I wandered upstairs. They called it 3 Floors of Fun.
Yeah.
The basement was alternative or rock or just something I never checked out, but it was usually the main stage. But then I went upstairs, and that was the first time I really heard techno, which, again, Electrifying Mojo turning into just the strange alien beeps and boops from Deep Space Radio. And then I go upstairs and I hear it actually at full volume,
on a proper system,
probably with wood cabinets for the speakers. Yes.
Oh God, yeah.
But I go in, there's no light at all. There's just the street lights, or from across the street. Those buildings are just coming in through the these like big plate glass windows, and there's a DJ. I think it might have been Billy Bob. Doesn't really matter.
That guy.
Yeah, like multiple records, like 3 or 4 tables going. But when I walked in, there's just like the natural kind of city light coming in, and then just a grid of people of like, as I remember, just like all ages, and I was like, what is this?
So what year is this around?
This was 95, maybe 94. Probably 95. I think I was a senior in high school. Anyway, and it's just all like, drag queens and like young kids and like middle-aged dudes and just all these people just in perfect lockstep in a grid, heads kind of bowed before the bass spin to Philip's track 2.
Oof.
And
that is just, there's nothing like it.
It just changed my entire life.
Yeah, no, you can't. I'm just,
because
I feel so bad that people can't hear that how it's supposed to be heard.
I know, and it just... and it's weird. I think it's almost like you're saying with the artificial intelligence comps. Like, it looked very futuristic. Like, almost like this cross section of people just got a little possessed. There was something a little kind of sinister about all these people kind of bowed over in the dark, marching back and forth to worshiping like a speaker. And at the same time, something very spiritualized about it.
Totally. And actually, just a slight variant in Chicago, they played the fuck out of that track, every DJ, and just basic channel in general. But the basement speakers were big enough where the queens could get on top of the bass bin and lead the dancing, in their platform shoes or whatever. And oh man, I was at church, it was a temple, it was like worship time. I was just like, just praising the maker at that point, you know what I mean? Because like, it was just so ecstatic, the whole experience. And I don't know. I hope other people get to experience the ecstasy that bass music can bring you someday. Plus, whatever the Germans were doing at this time, it's like this fuzzy kind of a sound. It's echo chamber kind of a sound, and it's like dub reggae somehow, but like slamming dub reggae.
Yeah, I think that's what it was the two guys, Mark Ernestus Moritz von Oswald, the basic channel guys.
Yeah.
They just suddenly decide to incorporate the 70s dub techniques into techno, right? And then now I think both of them they're just doing really interesting, more live work with different drummers and bands from around the world, so it's interesting, that kind of trajectory for sure.
Yeah, beautiful. And the whole unifying thing. So in the Midwest, I mean, maybe you saw this. I didn't really, but like, again, our rave scene, I sometimes just prefer to call it warehouse parties because it wasn't like how you imagine a rave. At least my generation wasn't. There weren't like tons of Dr. Seuss hats and pacifiers at the places I went to. So there wasn't, or in whatever the fuck else. There might be full on, World War I gas masks at the place at the parties I was at. But like, just a limit on the, like the chains of like little candy things and whatever. I mean, there was that, but that just wasn't that much of a part of it. So like, I don't know. That detracts. Plur detracts from. They just call it Plur. Detracts from in Midwestern raves, as far as I'm concerned. It was all about like, just getting into an ecstatic space. So yeah. And then we're on the home run here. Plastic Band, Consumed. Do you have anything additional to say about that? You kind of already talked about it, but...
Yeah, I kind of did. I'll just say, though, like, playing it, I forgot what it was there, but, like, 40% slower. It was a little religious experience for me here in Ohio. In middle age, around midnight, with headphones on, I was like, how slow can this go? And just hearing all this strange static and spaces. And remembering the first time I heard that album as well and not really connecting to it. But now in my mind, it's kind of like the 2001 Space Odyssey monolith of just this, like, very stark landmark, in electronic music that kind of pushes that sound, I think, to its vanishing point. and everything since then has been sort of diminishing returns.
Yeah, I could just say that I have a sort of, I don't know, it's somewhat associated with the ADHD brain, but like this synesthesia where sound, like this kind of sound, is very textured to me. I experience it. I actually feel it. I don't just hear it or whatever. And so like that's why I love this kind of music. I love the repetition because of the trance sort of thing, which is part of why I don't. This is a point of difference on between you and me. I don't like it slowed down. I like it at full speed. I would put it on good headphones to go to sleep to because it chilled me out. Like techno. Let's say house music was usually played at like 123 beats per minute. Maybe techno was like, I don't know, probably 133. But a lot of it was just played at 130. I don't really know how fast any of them played. But to me, that was my heartbeat. That was just like, I didn't want it to be slowed down. And it had a very calming effect. And then, I just got to see and be in these textured noises that like really, it's hard for people to understand. Like the music is clearly not about melody. Or harmony, it's about texture.
It genuinely is the illustration of what you talk about a lot, which is repetition with difference.
Yeah,
the constant repetition, and then suddenly, particularly with those
shifting,
those concept records in particular, it feels like a conversation because it establishes the repetition. You're so familiar with the logic of what techno's supposed to do or what its parameters are that suddenly, like an offbeat snare or a strange unexpected hi-hat becomes jarring, even monumental, and to create that kind of a zone I think is really interesting. And I think then slowing it down so it becomes something that works, just shifting its context for me becomes a really, I don't know, I just feel like it's a generative exercise. But I get it, you fall asleep while drinking coffee unless, you need to have 200 BPM music to doze off.
Yeah, well, everybody thought that was weird, but I just saw this like recent research that like there's like ADHD music that's really like textured and repetitive, and I'm just like, yeah, it's already, there's all the kind they listen to sucks. Like the good kind was made by Richie Houghton a long time ago. I guess not a long time ago, but
30 years is a long time.
We're old. Well, I'm old. I'm from a different generation than you, but I am older than you, but yeah, I'm old. And I would say too that part of the variance with the sound was so that it could be the same repetitive, sequenced drums and synth line or whatever, or not even just beeps and bloops or whatever, but like they were always like fucking with them. Yeah. So like the example that I would use that like was like so unbelievably repetitive, and you brought him up in the last episode, DBX, Dan Bell, but like he did like get on Richie's label, and like they were friends and everything. That he moved away from that. He like doesn't make anything like that kind of minimal tech anymore. But so the exempla gratis, if you will, was his I'm Losing Control. Yeah. And so, like, God damn, yeah. I mean, it is like, I don't know, like 20 minutes long at least. And it's the same fucking thing, except like, I guess what he thought to do was just like somebody saying, I'm losing control over and over again. But he would just run the same filters and the same effects that you would put on a synth line. He put it on the vocal. And then you would just hear the human voice. And actually there is a lot of techno like this that was originally made out of just the human voice, and then you just mutate it like all kinds of ways. And man, does that have some fascinatingly and wonderful effects or whatever. But like just watching somebody say, or watching, because for me it was visual, somebody say losing control over and over again, where it just falls apart and becomes, I mean, you just realize that, hey man, there are places and dimensions that you can only get to certain ways, like, and we're going there with certain minds. So yeah, anyway.
Actually, that song came to mind when we were, I guess, in the last episode talking about my issue with panic attacks. That the fundamental fears of losing control.
Oh yeah,
and that idea of that generating a physical response in the body, and how that can either lead towards the sublime or it can lead towards crying on the side of the highway. But to switch gears for a second and talk about how old we are.
Oh damn.
You know, it's easy. I do this all the time, and it's really probably not a great habit, but to think that 2026, 30 years ago, Richie Hawtin's concept records come out. From 1996 to 66, that would be like Jefferson Airplane's White Rabbit or something.
Right, yeah.
But I do wonder sometimes looking back, it's just that mid 20th century was just a very unique, fertile moment for shifts in technology, shifts in culture, shifts in scenes.
Yeah.
Whereas I think it's harder.
It's not utter nostalgia. I think it's true. There
right,
was.
But because I don't think I can find two songs to put together, 96 and 2026, that sound as different as, say, you know, Consumed and White Rabbit or something like that. It just feels like...
I just don't know anybody's going to have that experience that you had going up to the third weirdo floor and hearing Basic Channel for the first time. You just know you're not in Kansas anymore. Like you have really entered some new place.
I know, but if we live in a time with AI and if we all have technology at our fingertips, we can make music on our phones. I'm just kind of surprised that there isn't another moment where people are wandering into warehouses being like, what the fuck is that?
Yeah, right. Well, let's keep looking, I guess. I mean, I think that's all. Oh, yeah, and Richie Hawtin has a song called Panic Attack. You know that one?
Oh, yeah.
I keep saying the song, whatever, you know what I mean. But, like, yeah, so, yeah, and that thing is fucking mutated and textured. And, I mean, that's his thing. I mean, with the restriction, the extreme limitation on the sound, you can then vary it in these, like, really kind of, like, interesting ways. So, like, limitations don't all the limitation of the structure of a techno track, 4 on the floor, 133 whatever.
Well, that's right, because now we live in a time without limitation, right? Whereas
Okay,
before
maybe
you
that's
did
it. Yeah,
have
right.
like, you know, whether it was in terms of the hardware you had access to, modes of distribution, whatever it was, there were parameters you were fighting against. And now you're just kind of letting it all in, which is really cool, but then it becomes about selection. And it's hard to select something new when you have everything available to you. Whereas when you just only had, what can I do with this Casio or a photocopier or whatever, you know, you're going to try to find ways to fuck it up.
Which is the story of Acid House and the 303.
Yeah,
not to get into a gearhead thing, but it's like reusing shitty technology, limitation, and then, you know, like taking this thing, using it incorrectly, and like according to, you know, its design purpose. And then, you know, they just use these 303s. It was supposed to be a bass, you know, studio bass player for you or whatever. If you didn't have a bass player, it didn't sound like that. It sucked. So then, you know, you take this thing and you warp it, which happened first in Chicago, which is why there's this beef between Detroit claiming techno. But the sound then, all the limitations you have, like if you look at a 303, it's like this really small thing, and it's got like, I don't know how many dials it's got on it. I've never actually done it, but like 6. You know, and it's basically like a really, you know, it's a synthesizer so that you can, you know, tweak out and put the sound wave through filters and make it, texture it in weird ways.
I opened the gearhead door, so you walked right through it. That's fine.
Sorry.
No. It's I'm the one who opened the door. So when you brought up Panic Attack, acid techno, it just made me think too about the sort of mythology that surrounded the music at the time. Like, do you remember Plastic Man's Sheet 1, and it looked like it was perforated into little acid tabs? And did you hear those stories of, like, you know, so got pulled over by the cops?
Yeah. I think that's true, actually.
Or if you do them all, there is one that has a hit. You know,
I read an interview where Richie said that was true. Well, and also, speaking of Packard Plant, he got banned from coming from America. And he was not allowed. Right. I mean, for a long time. I don't know, you know, what the current status is there, but it was like there was a point in time which it was just over.
Which it was right after the Oklahoma City bombings, actually. And then suddenly there was, like, you know, more security.
Okay.
And he didn't have the correct, you know, cabaret performance or whatever crazy paperwork they required to do a show, you know, and so he was banned, which is what led him to do the concept records, because he felt like he was stranded in Windsor.
Oh, I see.
And had nothing to do, so he just put out one a month, and it led to those. So I guess it's kind of good that Border Patrol did that in a way, because it led to great art, which is not always that's not a solid argument, though. Yeah.
We ready to wrap it up here?
I think clearly, yeah.